So today's session, Grounded Communication for Moments That Matter, is part of one of our three-part nonprofit forum series titled Nonprofit Communication Strategies and Tools. So certainly in 2025's fast-paced and ever-changing environment, nonprofit leaders are often called upon to deliver difficult news or navigate transitions or steady your teams through uncertainty. So this session is designed to equip you with the tools and mindsets to do just that with empathy, clarity, and purpose. So our presenters will walk us through really practical strategies for managing stress responses, preparing for consequential conversations, and really showing up with authenticity and confidence in your workplace. So we're really thrilled to be joined today by two exceptional coaches from Articulation, which is a Columbus-based firm that helps leaders become unforgettable communicators. So Acacia Duncan is the Director of Coaching and Training at Articulation and a longtime trainer, speaker, and stage director. She's coached hundreds of professionals from CEOs to first-time presenters and brings decades of experience helping people communicate with purpose, precision, and passion. Acacia also has direct experience as a nonprofit founder with Available Light Theater. Blythe Coons is an executive communication coach and trainer at Articulation who specializes in helping clients bring their most powerful stories to life. With a background in teaching, professional theater, and organizational leadership, she brings a really unique blend of creativity and strategic insight to her work. She's also the president of the board of the Contemporary Theater of Ohio. So before I hand it off to our presenters, who are well versed in managing nonprofit organizations from different aspects and roles, I just have a few housekeeping notes about Zoom. So today we're not in webinar format, which means that you'll have to navigate keeping yourself muted if you're not participating in the presentation portion of this event. See, there's a perfect example for us right there. It can be a little tricky, but we've got lots of grace. We're just here for training. It's no big deal. But just watch your sharing your screen, sharing your your mute button, your video button, all of that. Use your chat box to introduce yourself, and you can submit questions anytime. Even for any technical issues, you can use the chat box and someone from our team will assist you. You will receive a follow-up email today with the presentation materials, and you'll be getting a link to a survey so that you can give us some feedback. Let us know what you thought about today's session. We really hope to encourage candid questions and open discussion, especially in the breakout rooms today. So thank you all for being here. And now I'll turn things over to Acacia and Blythe from Articulation.
Thank you so much, Erin. My name's Acacia Duncan, and I couldn't be more happy to be here today. Just because I'm speaking a lot at the beginning, I want to give Blythe an opportunity to say hi so you can hear her voice as well.
Hi, everybody. I'm Blythe. It's lovely to be here with all of you today. Thanks so much for showing up and for being interested in learning more about communication.
Yes, and as Erin said today, it may feel a little different than other nonprofit forums today, and that is because communication is something where what we're going to talk about today, the ideas are really simple because the basic ideas of great communication are simple. The complicating factors come in with your expertise, your content, and your real audiences that you have to communicate with. So you can make the most out of this session for yourself by being wildly active. Please feel free to type things in the chat. We'll be monitoring that. There will be moments where we invite people to come off mute. And then, of course, when you go into your breakout rooms, we hope that you'll really be able to connect with each other. So it was a couple of months ago when Erin reached out to us and said, hey, we do this nonprofit forum thing, and it would be great to give our nonprofit leaders support when it comes to communication because it's so critical. But communication is this just ocean of a topic, right? We could go anywhere with our time together, partly because we're doing it all day, every day. So with Erin, we talked about the different communication tools and strategies that would be most critical to you in your roles and in your organizations. So over the next 3 months, that's what we're going to be doing today or together. And today, we're going to kick it off with what might feel like some of the most critical moments. I'm going to start my PowerPoint now. Hopefully you can all see that.
Think we see, there you go.
Here we are. All right, so We're going to talk about grounded communication in moments that matter. These are high stakes communications. They could be tough conversations when emotions might run high, when you really need a message to land, like maybe you're sharing a change to a program, or moments when there are big opportunities at stake. Perhaps you're talking to a potential corporate donor or a corporate partner. In other words, these are all moments when there might be consequences based on how well you can communicate. So recently, we actually have been able, we had the honor of helping a group here in Columbus, a nonprofit organization that needed to be able to present their mission and their message and their results to city officials. And there were some big consequences to this moment. A lot was at stake. In fact, there could be years-long implications based on what the audience heard in that moment. They were acutely aware that there were a lot of risks involved in that communication. And really, when we go in to coach leaders to help them nail these moments, we think of ourselves as doing a sort of risk mitigation. And all speaking carries risk. I don't want to pretend it doesn't. You can never know that the audience will hear things in the way that you want them to. And in these moments that matter, the risks are even higher, which means we really do need good ways to mitigate as much risk as we can. So while you can't predict what will happen in the moments, you can prepare for it. So with this in mind, we know that the moments in this room are going to be very different based on where you sit. So just take a moment to think about a category of moment that matters for you in your organization. Now, I mentioned a lot of big scale moments, but small scale moments can matter too. For instance, those conversations with your team might be a moment that matters most to you. So as you're thinking about that moment, go ahead and open up the chat and type in your moment.
Team meetings. Ooh, performance reviews.
Yeah,
Fundraising pitches at house parties, donors creating team culture, leadership transition. My goodness. Upskilling,
yeah,
donor visits, board meetings, community engagements. There's so many different kinds.
yeah. I have one I want to ask a question about actually. It was near the beginning. And if you're able to come off mute, Christiana, when you talked about communicating strategy changes, how often do you find yourself needing to do that in your organization?
Not terribly often. We try to do a 3-year strategic plan. So typically when that happens, we stick to the plan, but sometimes there are funding opportunities that come up or other things that we have to prioritize in the moment that change the strategy.
Yeah. So those 3-year moments are really important, but then there's these little changes that you're having to communicate along the way. I imagine many people in this room have this same experience. Blythe, are you seeing any other trends here?
Lots of trends, team meetings, board meetings, communicating mission, communicating with community engagements. But Jessica Flowers had communicating threats without bringing anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah. I would invite Jessica. I wonder what your thoughts will be when Blythe goes through our first module of the day about the purpose of that communication. I wonder what your thoughts will be after that. Really, when I'm seeing all of these pop up, and thank you so much for your active engagement here. Please feel free to reply to each other and engage in the chat as well. I mean, we see these in not just nonprofits, but we see these in corporations as well. I think the difference might be that there's a lot more community I see in this particular list than we would see when we go into a for-profit organization, in that those moments are often very public, which does increase some of the stress of those moments and the risk involved. So when you're thinking about communicating those moments, it's really important to have a plan. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. But I have to tell you, Erin told you I'm a theater person. And so all my theater friends were really surprised when last year in 2024, this theater nerd got really into sports. I really loved the Paris Olympics. Maybe they got me because the opening ceremony was very theatrical, so they won my heart. But I do love watching the Olympics and other sporting events like that. But my favorite thing when I watch these events isn't included in a lot of the replays that you might see. Because I really love, and maybe shout out or raise a hand, if you also love watching the athletes before they compete. You know, as they're walking around the track and they get that nice close up of them. Yes, I love watching athletes before they compete because it's just so fascinating. They look so grounded. Like they know exactly what they need to do. Their job is to execute. And I'm thinking, my gosh, this is the moment they have prepared their entire life for. And it's amazing to see how calm and focused they are. How do they do that? Well, I went and found a little video to inspire us today. And this video comes from an interview in 2012 of Michael Phelps and his coach, Bob Bowman. So if you don't know, Michael Phelps is the most successful and most decorated Olympian of all time. He got 28 medals. And we took a little clip here that talks about how he and his coach helped him prepare to swim at his best in his moments that mattered at these competitions. So as you listen, I invite you to think about like what you hear from Michael that might apply to you.
Bob started, at a very young age to prepare me to be ready for anything and everything.
I think that the pressure seemed to affect me more than it affected him.
One of the things that has been good for me, I think, besides training, has been my sort of mental preparation.
When you have that kind of powerful brain stuff going, I think it translates into performance.
The natural ability to deal with high-pressure, high-stakes competition is just one facet of Phelps' success. Along with his coach, Bob Bowman, Phelps has extensively trained himself to visualize and plan for both good and bad outcomes.
He's the best I've ever seen and maybe the best ever in terms of visualization. He will see it exactly the perfect race, and he will see it like he's sitting in the stands, and he'll see it like he's in the water. And then he will go through scenarios, what if things don't go well?
If my suit ripped or if my goblet broke, what would I do?
So he has all of this in his database so that when he swims the race, he's already programmed his nervous system to do one of those. And he'll just pick the one that happens to come up. If everything's perfect, he'll just go with the perfect one. If he has to make a change, he's got it in there.
The added benefit of visualizing all of these different scenarios is the confidence gained from knowing he has a plan for everything. Bowman's computer analogy is apt. Because the different reactions are programmed into Phelps' mind, he doesn't have to worry about adapting on the day of a competition, and instead can focus on being the best athlete he can in the present. His mental self-reliance may be his biggest strength.
You're muted.
So that is Michael Phelps' experience and what he brings with Bob Bowman. I wonder what you heard that really inspired or piqued your interest. Feel free if someone wants to come off mute, you can come off mute and share verbally or just type it in the chat.
For me, the mentally getting prepared, for situations, I compare it to like, when I'm working out in the gym, I got to get prepared for this bench press or a certain amount of reps on a pull-up or certain meetings, certain conversations, got to have that level of preparation to get the outcome that we're expecting so that we can be impactful. So it could be nervousness as well as to be able to answer any questions that the individuals may have so that that meeting could be of substance, so that we could get the desired outcome that we, hope for, because we got to make the best of that moment. People want to get to that moment, but it's about capitalizing off of it And so literally you can't just go in there normally. You have to go in there, to win it, so yes.
Yeah. Val, you used this great term at the beginning about like it's about getting your mindset right. And whether it's bench pressing, as you said, or preparing for a meeting, it's preparing yourself mentally. And I see a lot of people adding into the chat as well with like this idea of visualizing the different possibilities. And I love Jessica Flowers put in the chat as well, like, where's the line of this becoming overthinking? There is the possibility of that. I mean, I think he's pretty obsessive that he's thinking of absolutely everything, but that might depend on the scale of the risk that's involved in your communication. I'm going to take the one question from Stephanie, and then I'm going to keep going so we can get to the tools quicker. But Stephanie, please go ahead.
Okay. I thought I'd taken, okay. The one thing I'll add, I will say is by profession, I am a lawyer. And so the purpose of going to law school is to teach you how to think and to think about all of the different possibilities. And so I've spent 37 years basically conditioning my mind to mentally constantly run through, well, if this doesn't work, well, okay, what direction? If that doesn't work, then what direction? I am trying my best to back off of doing that because sometimes I think, well, no, oftentimes I have thought over the years that when you are constantly thinking of all or exploring, mentally exploring in your head all of the different possibilities, it stifles creativity, I think. And I also think that it gets to the other point that someone raised just before you started, you of overthinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that, that's if there's one thing that I would have a complaint about the way that my mind has been conditioned to work is that I feel as if all of my creativity is gone. I'm constantly thinking, following through logically.
Yeah.
Logically, how does this unfold?
I appreciate you sharing that perspective. I'm sure there are other people in the room, even who aren't lawyers, who have a little bit of that same thing. What we
Mhm.
hope you'll get out of today are some of the most critical questions to ask yourself. Rather than being Michael Phelps and trying to think of every single possible scenario, or being a lawyer and really planning for every possible scenario, what is the bare minimum that if you've thought through these questions, you probably are well enough prepared for most moments? Maybe you need to go further if it's a really super hypercritical moment. But for most of our critical moments that we mentioned in the chat today, probably these strategies will work. So I really invite you to reflect on that, everyone in the room, and what applies to you, because some things will apply to you and some things might not. And that's what we're going to be doing today. What are those key things that you can play out that we know as communication professionals are most helpful? And it really is going to go into three categories. We love alliteration, articulation. So they're the three P's. What's your purpose? Who are the people in the room? And what's your point of view? And really, it's going to be a series of questions that you ask yourself to explore that communication and get your mindset right. So let's kick it off. Blythe, do you want to start us off with purpose here?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I'm thinking about purpose, I want to take you into a moment in my life when I'm preparing for a tough conversation. I often start with thinking about what I want to say, and I'm sure you do too, but that's way lower in the system of importance and how we think. It's just what we want to say is just information, and that's driven by unconscious goals. So we want to start near to the topmost level of purpose where I can influence every decision I make, including what I want to or need to say. So when we're talking about purpose, we want to think about understanding the job. What is the purpose of the gathering? And this seems really simple in theory, but it isn't always. So tonight I'm hosting a birthday party for my mother-in-law. And the purpose of a birthday party is not to celebrate a birthday necessarily. That's just a category of an event. It's not a purpose. Is it to mark the year in the life My mother-in-law definitely doesn't want us to do that. Is it about surrounding yourself with the people who care most about you? We might be getting a little bit closer. Or maybe it's to set some goals for the year ahead with people who are going to help hold you accountable to those goals. Or is it to cross something off your bucket list? Is it to reconnect with your family or your siblings? What is the purpose of having this birthday party? Each of these purposes is unique and would affect every decision you or I make in planning that event. And the best purposes are specific, sometimes unique, and disputable. You might not like it if I plan a birthday party to help you set your goals so that we can hold you accountable to those goals for the year. Okay, so now I want you to open up the chat, and in your organization, you are preparing for a board meeting. But every board meeting has a different purpose. Not all of them are the same. So I want you to think about your own board meeting and what could be the purpose of this specific gathering. Maybe it was last month and you were doing something about the budget. Maybe it's this month and you're doing something about the strategic plan. What is your specific purpose of your board meeting? Go ahead and put it in the chat. Strategic plans, year-end accomplishments. We are right at the beginning of the fiscal year, aren't we? So there's a lot going on. Thought partnership, fundraising events, better ambassadors among the board, motivation. Yes, this is great. This is great. You guys have so many specific things that you want to accomplish in those board meetings. And it's really good to have this purpose. And the purpose is probably going to change. If you have 6 board meetings a year, each of those board meetings is going to carry a different purpose, and you want it to be unique. It may be that it's cyclical, but you certainly want it to be unique. All right, because that underlying purpose helps you make choices and it helps get rid of extraneous details. So if you're trying to make strategic choices, you're not necessarily talking about ambassadorship, although maybe those two things are linked. And if you're under stress in your communication, it can certainly help keep you focused on what really matters. Moving on to the next question, what is the goal of the communication? So this is the goal of the specific communication, and it gets us a little bit closer to the information and the content you might want to bring. I'm sure any of you, all of you have had someone sharing something with you and you wondered, oh my gosh, why are you telling me this all the time? Well, it's probably that the person did not have a clear goal for their communication, and you don't know what their goal is. They don't know what their goal is. So that can be pretty messy. But a clear goal for you has at least these parts. What do you want your audience to learn? What do you want them to feel? And what do you want them to do? And the feel is a really unique and important one because that feeling helps them motivate them to do what you want them to. So we train people, and I still sometimes miss this one. I will often get into a conversation with my husband or my kids about, something I'm venting and not really knowing what I want from them. I think, well, I'm just venting. And my husband might stop me and say, well, what can I do? How can I help? Do you want me to offer you support? Do you want me to offer you suggestions? Do you want me to go out and knock somebody over? No, nothing like that. But my goal hasn't always been clear. And to put it in more of your experience, you might be an executive director who is delivering tough financial news to your board. And my goodness, you probably could all raise your hand about that right now. But this particular executive director had to deliver tough financial news to the board, and she dug in. She didn't just want to talk about the numbers. She didn't want them to tell her who she should fire or how she should change her staff, because that's not the board's business. She really wanted to change their behavior. How was the board participating? How could they pitch in? How could they engage in the community more? How could they be better ambassadors? She wanted them to think, how can I help, and then act on it. And that is a very different communication than just communicating, here are the numbers of the tough financial situation that we're in right now. So knowing what you want to achieve certainly helps with the final question, which is, How will you measure success from the communication? I can say I want to feel that it went well, and that's good. It's not super strong. It's not super great. What if you focus on something more concrete? Actions that are taken, information that is repeated, or maybe it's that you stick to the message no matter what the audience throws at you. Today, my measure of success was making sure that we got a lot of engagement from you, that we got a lot of conversation from you. And I am already excited to see the level of engagement we're getting. So that was my level of success. Okay. Those are the three questions for purpose. What's the purpose of the gathering? What's the goal of the communication? How will you measure success? Now, you all wrote down moments that matter in the chat. So we're going to put you into breakout groups. And in your breakout group, I want you to share those moments. And then I want you to pick something. You're going to agree on something that you can all relate to. I'm going to guess you're going to get there pretty easily. If you can't choose, though, let me give you one. You have a regular team meeting where you need to discuss a dip in individual contributions. Okay, but I think you'll be able to find something. Then I want you to discuss the purpose of the moment. You can use the question guide to prompt your thinking as a group. And then if you have time, is there one more question you would add to the list? So what's the purpose? What's the goal? And how will you measure success? Is there an additional question you would add? So I think we are in a situation. Acacia, are we ready to send them to breakout rooms?
We are. We're going to send you these breakout rooms for about 8 minutes. We'll give you a little heads up when you're about halfway through and when there are 2 minutes remaining. When we come back, we'll be asking for any insights that you might have had, but particularly for you to put in the chat any additional questions you want to share with your fellow nonprofit leaders. Have fun in the rooms.
I'm sorry. Do I just pick up breakout room?
You should automatically be kicked into the room.
I
Let
think
me
she
look at
came in
your-
late, so she wasn't in the room
Ah,
splitting.
I switched
you
from my computer to my phone. That's why I think that was why. Okay, got it.
That's okay. There are a
We'll
few
get
other
to the room.
people in this room as well. Blythe, I'm going to need your help to assign people to the room, please. People coming back from your breakout rooms, welcome back. There's a good minute while people get to choose to come back. I hope you met new good people in your breakout rooms. Welcome back. Everybody's coming back from their breakout room. We have about another 20 seconds before everyone will be coming back. All right, now everybody should be returning for you, Blythe.
Wonderful.
We'll ask as you come out. Blythe,
sorry.
maybe you just want to mute everyone.
She was just like, yeah, we're in the middle of reorganizing, so they were just like talking about.
Okay, so some of you might have been caught off guard by the transfer back, but I hope you had wonderful conversations. I'm curious if you would just put in the chat, what did you learn? What was your takeaway from your conversation with some of the other people you were in those breakout rooms with? Yep. People are struggling with the exact same challenges.
Carla, I love how you talked about like working with others on this makes it seem smaller and less scary. And because speaking is a social activity, that is really true. Working with others actually does help to not only illuminate more potential things to think about, but also make it feel more manageable in some way. It's great.
Yeah. Mindset matters of all involved, and some individuals are getting blamed for outcomes that aren't their fault. Oh my goodness, lack of volunteer engagement. I think, yep, we're seeing that across the board. Different organizations, same challenges. Okay, so you realize that you are all in the same boat. Yes, we can do big things together. Absolutely, Alyssa. Thank you. So I hope that you started to think about those questions. What is the purpose? What is a measure of success? All of those elements that really make a difference in your communication and in your groundedness of it. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Acacia to talk more about the people.
Let me share my screen again for everyone. Here we are. So, you all grounded yourself in the purpose of your communication in the last one, which is truly critical to think through what your own goal is and to get really specific about it, what the overall purpose of the communication is, thinking more holistically, and then, of course, how you're going to measure success afterwards. But as I just mentioned a moment ago, speaking is social. So your audience always lives in choice. They get to decide, one, if they listen to you, and most importantly, they get to decide if they do what you're hoping that they will do. So for the second phase of mindset setting, it helps to think of your audience as the hero of the story. So I don't know if we have anybody else in this room who is a Star Wars fan. You can give a little emoji of some kind if you are also a Star Wars fan. But if you're not a Star Wars fan, you probably know enough to follow my metaphor here. And the idea is that your audience, they are the hero. They are Luke Skywalker when you communicate with them. You happen to be Obi-Wan, the wise mentor of sorts, and you're offering them a lightsaber. The lightsaber is the communication itself. So the more you can understand the hero of the story and communicate to them specifically, the more successful you will be. So what questions do we want to ask ourselves to ground into who the people are in the room? Well, it starts with some simple demographic kind of information. How many people are going to be in the room? What's their level and their experience that they're bringing? What kind of background do they have in what you need to communicate? Are they novices or are they deeply involved? Are they bringing any attitudes into the room? How do they already feel about what's going on? And then lastly, this one's not fun to talk about, but is there a nemesis in the room? Now, I use that word and sometimes people get a real picture of like a supervillain. So I wonder if anybody's willing to come off mute and say how they would define a nemesis.
Perhaps just a contrarian, just for the sake of being contrarians.
Leo, I love that because I actually think the nemesis sometimes is just, they're either contrarian or they're just an atypical thinker. And we need those people in our ecosystems in order to have a broad spectrum of thought. So the nemesis isn't always like trying to do something bad. They might be there to point out problems. Frankly, legal, lawyers, IT people, human resources, people who work in areas that have very clearly delineated rules can often be called nemesis, but they're really there to help. Now, we could do an entire class on how do you handle the nemesis, so I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole today about handling the nemesis. At this phase in your thinking to get your mindset right, it's just considering do I have one so that you can then plan around it. You are all smart people and could probably come up with probably, I don't know, there's like 100 people on this call. There would probably be 200 strategies for dealing with a nemesis. The next question, after we kind of get grounded in who the people are, is to think about what the hero wants. Life would be so much simpler if I could share my point of view and I could tell people what I want them to do, and then they did it. That'd be so great, right? But life would also be a lot less interesting if that were true. So if the audience is the hero of the journey, knowing what they want is one of the most important things to consider. Do they want to feel something? Do I want to give money because I want to feel proud of what I did? Or do they maybe want to get something? Do I want to give money because I want a good reputation in my community? And recognition is something that's going to really matter to me. Narrowing in on what the audience feels or wants is really useful. Now, in some communications, this is remarkably easy and so much fun. If you have a message for your board that is, we got a huge grant, that's a really great, easy communication because you probably want them to celebrate with you and or maybe even talk about it on social media so the world hears. But this is a really hard one to figure out when you have to share news or information that your audience does not want to hear, or you maybe need to ask them to do something that they do not want to do. So in the chat, I wonder if anybody, if something popped into your mind there, something you've had to communicate that your audience didn't want to hear, or something you had to ask that they didn't want to do.
Putting a program is affecting resources.
Yeah, Jessica's got a great example. As other people write in theirs, we're going to use Jessica's without knowing any more detail because Jessica doesn't need to you don't need to tell us all the details here. But cutting a program that was affecting resources, and you need to advise your board to make the final call to cut this program. What is something that you could share that you think your audience might want, that the board might want out of cutting the program? And put that, actually come off mute if you have an idea. What's one thing that the audience might want?
How much it costs to run the program versus how much will be saved, who, in terms of the population that we serve, who will be affected by it.
Great. So
Yeah, I mean, they're
the
just different things.
the board might be motivated by they want financial health of the organization. So we're going to lean into financial health. What's an alternative thing that maybe another board member might want?
Well, so Jessica put to know that the hole will be filled or that there will be somebody replaced. The larger context of what survives came through. Full transparency is another one.
Yes, I love these. They could really want that transparency, Molly. I really love that because sometimes you don't share something where there's not going to be a good answer for them getting something they want. There isn't. There just isn't sometimes. So then going up a higher level, what's something higher than that we can all agree upon? And transparency might be one of those things. The organization continuing, in this case, might be one of those things as well. But this is the idea of what the hero wants and how you can really continue to level up until you can come to something that you're sure the audience can get behind and care about. And sometimes, in order to do this, it can help to think about what life looks like for the audience that you're speaking to. How are they seeing and experiencing the world? What are their pain points? What motivates them? And after you communicate, and fingers crossed they do what you want them to do, what will they get? What will ultimately be different for them? So we could come back to this example and Jessica, I'll invite you to be the person to share an idea here. if they like agree we're going to cut this program, what will they get if they agree to that?
That's a really thought-provoking question, and that's something that we really wrestled with when handling this exact issue, because we knew that, like what I had shared, they were wondering, this program has a big impact and we do something in the community. How will we fulfill that? And so we really had to think about what will they get out of that. And we tried to really make sure that they had a sense of confidence in the direction that we were moving forward. So for some people, it was ensuring that they knew that this impact would be just pivoted in a new program or in a new way. Or for other people, it's, well, we're going to make sure that our messaging and that our connection with the community is sustained in this way. So really just for us, it was thinking about that they were getting that reassurance and that sense of confidence to move forward with that decision that was being made.
Thank you for sharing that. As everyone was listening, what I picked up on that maybe many of you did is that, Jessica, it sounds like you really went deep and figured out that people had different things that they might get out of it in order to get a little closer to that agreement. I think that's great, and that's pretty typical for difficult conversations like this. All right, we have one more question to think about when it comes to the people. After you've thought about what they want, what life's going to look like for them, it can be really unlocking to think about what is getting in the audience's way of doing what you want them to do. There's some hidden obstacle probably that might stop them. So I'm going to give you a story here. We were working with an organization that really relied heavily on groups of volunteers from companies to come in and help run their programs. And their strategy that they had used very successfully for many years was that they would really recruit a few individuals within the organization. They would get those individuals really passionate about the activities, and those people would go back to the company with a charge to sign their colleagues up, right? So they had the sign-up list, and it worked really great. And then post-COVID, when things started to come back to normal, this strategy stopped working very well. They were struggling to fill their lists and get these volunteers and to even get people willing to do the recruiting. Now, if you're following along and thinking like, okay, so what was getting in their way? Well, what was getting in their way was that once people were working from home in some of these organizations, it was no longer so easy to just kind of walk around, chill in the office and hand people the sign-up sheet and get them to sign up. They had to dedicate specific time to think about that in order to get people to sign up. So what was getting in the audience's way was that this activity now took a lot more effort and time. So this organization re-strategized afterwards. They found simpler sign-up methods. They created some more digital sign-up tools that would make things easier for these individual volunteers to get people to sign up. But they wouldn't have figured that out if they didn't think about what was getting in the audience's way. Other things that sometimes get in people's way, I have seen people write in the chat today, and that could be things like stress responses being triggered, people being fearful of something or anxious about something that may get in the way of people hearing your information. They could also be distracted. Don't know anything about distraction in this world. And these are things that might get in their way. Now, at this point, what you'll notice is we're not solving for all of these. We're more using this as a mindset moment to start to figure out which need to be solved for and which can be solved for. So we're going to send you out for our second breakout room. I think we don't quite have time for our second breakout room. So instead, I'm going to just give us a reflection question and invite you a moment to think about these questions. Is there anything missing? What else would you want to know about your audience before you have this conversation in a moment that matters? Go ahead and put those questions in the chat. And if more questions aren't coming, I actually think that could be a really good thing. We narrowed these questions to think about the most critical ones, and these will, like, they're great back of the napkin questions, even if you're just called into a meeting last minute. You can think about these and let your brain get to work. You're all smart people. You will begin to figure out solutions from it. And I do see a couple questions coming
They
in
have.
now.
Yeah, they have started to come up with more questions. It just took a moment.
Yeah.
And ideally these are prompts to think about other questions that you want to make sure you have in your pocket as you're planning your communications in the future.
Great. All right, we're going to go to our last P now, which Blythe is going to take us through. And that is your point of view.
Okay, so up until now, all of the work has been external. You've been talking about your audience, you've been talking about other people. But so much can go wrong if you haven't really taken the time to ground yourself in your own point of view. So, what does this mean? The first question in our perspective is, what is your role? And this is not your title. This is a moving target. It changes from moment to moment. So in this particular moment, it could be you're a representative. It could be that you're a spokesperson, a manager, a confidant, an empathetic ear. But it's not I'm executive director or I'm the VP of this programs or whatever. My role today is not to be an executive coach and speech trainer. It's to be a guide. And things can go really wrong when you get your roles confused. So if I subconsciously want to be a friend, but I actually need to be a board president, those two things can clash because there could be a scenario when I have to give difficult feedback and it makes it even harder to do if I'm thinking, I'm a friend, I'm a friend. Or I might agree to be kind, even though that's not the best thing for the organization. I know it's so silly that we have to do that. It's just what leadership wants. Okay, well, now I've thrown leadership under the bus, and that is not good or helpful to anybody. So that's why it's really important to know and really think about what your role is at any given moment. The next question is, once you know your goal, what you know your audience, you know what their perspective is, the work needs to be done. So what do you need? What do I need to prepare? For today, Acacia and I needed to gather stories and examples that might resonate with you from the nonprofit world, from our experience. I also knew I needed to attend a previous webinar to see what the vibe is like in these. I also needed to practice out loud. We both do. Acacia really likes to practice on her treadmill because speaking is embodied. And so what are the ways that you embody your speaking? Is role playing a part of your practice? Do you work with one of your colleagues to talk through the conversation or the communication beforehand? Are you practicing out loud? We hope you are. We really hope you are, because the body needs to build that muscle memory of saying the words. If you're thinking the thought, it's not necessarily going to come out the same way when you say it out loud. And your stakes are often pretty high. If the stakes are high, you need to have this step as part of your preparation process, or you are leaving yourself open to a huge amount of risk. That brings us to the last question, the next last question, my apologies. I call this the don't cut off your nose to spite your face question. What do I need long-term? What is my super objective? Unfortunately, because you are rarely communicating in a vacuum, this is really important. And today's message, this specific communication, is part of a longer need that you might have. So for an example, what makes talking to a board member such a dance for me is that I need them to step up for this one event, this gala committee. They're not really pulling their weight, but I also want them to think about a larger investment in the leadership, the future leadership of the board. And so it can be really complicated how I speak to them in this one moment, because it might jeopardize my chances to get them on board later for that bigger step. Knowing what you might need long-term is super important. It's more important sometimes than putting out fires, which is something I know we do all the time, every day. Okay, so this is the last question. What is my license to influence? And I hope at this point in your careers, you have a sense of this, because this is really about building your own confidence. When you're talking to a CEO of an organization, you want to write you a big check, or you're talking to a senator who you want to influence the budget. It helps to put in some thinking about this, not just for them, but for you. Why should your audience listen to you? What qualities do you bring? What experience do you bring? What stories can you tell that build trust and rapport that help establish your license to influence on any given occasion? Okay, so that was a really rapid run through point of view, but I think it's really, really important. So at this point, I want you to consider a moment, and this is really a thought exercise, not a breakout room, but I want you to consider a moment that missed. It didn't go well. What preparation might have helped? If you want, you can put it in the chat, but you don't have to out yourself here. I just want you to think about it and consider in the future that like you debrief these moments because they're super important. And you want to consider what went well, what would make next time even better, particularly around how you prepared for purpose, people, and your own point of view. All right. Acacia, I'm going to hand it back to you.
So as I listen, because I'm able to sit back and listen to Blythe, I recognize that each of these areas of preparing your mindset are like they have lots of little tendrils that go out and affect a lot of things. So in Blythe, when you've been listening today, I wonder which of these areas might be something that you could put more focus on in order to feel more confident and more prepared and ultimately more grounded in those communication moments that matter. Is it the questions related to purpose, like goal and your measure of success? Is it the questions related to people and their attitudes and what they need, the hero of the story? Or is it actually taking time to make sure you're thinking about your perspective and what you need in this moment? And put one of the 3 Ps in the chat that you think for you could be the next thing to work on to improve your communications.
Seeing a lot of people. Well, we're getting a fair share of all of them.
Yeah. And I bet if you work on a team and you bring this back to your team, I have a feeling, because I've done this for a really long time, there are going to be members of your team who are excellent at thinking about all the purpose questions. They have that mindset. Then you're going to have the people on your team who lead with heart and empathy, and their ability to see the perspective of others is unparalleled. And then you're going to have people who are really great at remembering that they can get in their own way, and so they can think about their own point of view. So I do wonder, as you go back to your organizations, how much you can leverage the strengths of your entire organization so it doesn't all fall on you. Now we have one more module that's part of this session, but I also really want to leave time for you guys to have questions. So here's the deal I'm going to make with you. The module we have to end this session is going to be included in the listening workshop as well. It is about stress and how you handle stress in those moments. Because as we know, you might do all the preparation in the world and then you're thinking about, hey, what if things go wrong? But what I know as a professional communicator is the better question is, what about when things go wrong? Because things are going to go wrong in communications. That is just the nature of communicating. So in our listening workshop, and if you don't get to attend, it will be included in the video, of course, we will talk through the 4 stress responses and how to handle that. But in order to make this a better conversation with all of you, we're going to spend the last 10 minutes opening the floor for your reflections and your questions. Feel free to use the chat, but I'll invite one person. I saw like Alyssa came immediately off mute. So Alyssa, I can call on you because you did that for whatever question or comment you might have. And everybody else, go ahead and add your questions to the chat.
I was hitting my video, but I can ask a question. So I'm dying to know some of the stress responses, and I'm not sure of the listening webinar that you referenced. Is that a future webinar that you're holding?
It will be
September.
In September.
It's actually August, Blythe. September will be storytelling.
Okay.
I
Thank you.
apologize.
It's okay. Yeah, it will be in August. You've heard the 4 stress responses before, so to preview, it's fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And what we'll talk about is what are some strategies you can practice when you're not under stress in order to combat them when they hit you in the moment. What additional questions do you have before I ask you questions? Let me ask you then a question, which would be, how do you spend your time when you're preparing for these moments? Let's say it's a board meeting. How much time do you spend on these broader questions, percentage-wise maybe, versus how much time you spend preparing your information and your content? I'm just curious in this room. I bet there's a lot of different perspectives.
Maybe a better question is, do you prepare?
I saw Fel come off mute. What did you want to share, Fel?
I think for me, it's more or less gathering information and not even touching on anything that you might have shared, and it might have come across, but not intentionally, but more so just information.
Yeah.
So then doing it in this perspective, maybe it would ignite and fuel the board members more. I don't know, but yeah, definitely more just information. I would say that.
And Fel, you're not alone. Thank you for bravely coming off mute and just saying this. Actually, this is not the approach I usually take. You have a lot of people in the chat agreeing. Some people who already might take this approach, but then some people who say, I do spend a lot of time on the information. And as Blythe said at the very beginning of the purpose section, it's pretty human and normal because that's going to be what you end up communicating. That's the what of the communication. These bigger foundational questions should help you narrow the what, which is awesome because there's usually way more stuff you want to talk about than you have time for. But it also helps to make sure that your communication doesn't go awry as often because you really knew that purpose and you knew the people and your point of view ahead of time.
One of the things I'm seeing in the comments in the chat are that you spend a lot of time on content, but I think one of the main messages we want you to hear is that if you consider the questions, the content that you choose comes more easily. You can start to organize that content a little bit more easily, and you tend to eliminate the content that isn't necessary for that communication.
What else is on your mind here in the room while you have us in these communication moments that matter?
Okay, so I'll out myself. One of the things that I have struggled with is in communicating moments is not, first of all, remembering that some people have a much softer shell, that everybody does not have a hard shell. And when you are dealing with people who work a lot and are concerned about other people, sometimes they're just used to everybody being nice all the time. And be concerned as opposed to just simply saying, look, this is and thus and so. And I hit my knee on that one a lot.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
And we coach a lot of people around that. What I would say in the context of what we've talked about today, if anyone feels that same way, that sometimes their style actually might not align with the style of the way another person likes to hear information. It may
Right.
help you on your cheat sheet of questions, either under people or point of view, to ask, like, does my style align with this person? Because even in the way you asked that question, Stephanie, I could hear you being careful with your choice of words. So you do have the capability to really be careful with your words and think about that. And I think we all in this room probably have some of that capability. But it is really important. That is one of the things to consider. How does my style attach to their style? And because they're the hero, in the moment that matters, I need to figure out a way to at least meet them halfway.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. And one way that I deal with this, and I don't know if it's just a way of chickening out, is if there's somebody else who is better equipped to communicate the message just so that the overall work gets done, because none of this is really about me, it is about the people who are served, then that person should be definitely be the person to do it.
That's powerful advice, I think, for anyone on this team. Who's the right person on the team to do this communication? Yeah, 100%. I often have the opposite problem. I am sometimes overly concerned with the impact of my message, and so I will not say things sometimes as directly as my colleague Blythe likes to hear it. And I need to change my approach sometimes with Blythe, right, Blythe?
And sometimes I'm too direct for someone like Acacia wants to hear.
Yeah, yeah. It's part of the reason I love communication, everybody, is like, hopefully nothing you heard today, and I'm going to start to wrap this up. Hopefully nothing you heard today feels revolutionary. If you came for the secret that will unlock everything for you, I hate to say it, but there isn't a secret. The secret is that the tools are simple. The things you need to think through are simple. What is complicated about it is that people are complicated. And you are dealing with goals that don't always align. And so spending time before you get in that room to get your mindset right and think about what my purpose is, how it aligns to the people, and what point of view I will bring will really be a big part of your future success. I want to thank you all today. I'm putting in the chat right now a link to a survey that you can take to let us know what you think of our content and articulation. And Blythe, I mean, thank you as well.
Thank you, Acacia. You did a fantastic job. And thank you from the bottom of our hearts for showing up, for being curious, for asking questions, for engaging with us at the level that you did. It really makes a big difference.
Yes. And Erin, we'll toss it back to you.
Thank you. I think anyone who's on this session that's been to a previous nonprofit forum could say that this is one of the most engaged and intimate forums we've had before in a Zoom setting. So we really appreciate your bravery. And of course, Acacia and Blythe, thank you for facilitating this. And you can join us, participants, next month for part 2 of this series, which is all about listening skills, as you heard. And that's on August 6th. You'll get some more details in your email about that. At the foundation, we're really committed to supporting leaders like you through learning opportunities that are really practical and relevant. So we're hopeful that today's conversation is a part of that broader effort, and we're really grateful you chose to spend this time with us. Please complete that survey that Acacia was speaking about. You'll also get the link in a follow-up email. You know, your feedback we take really seriously. It helps us improve and shape future sessions. So watch your inbox for that follow-up email, which will also include presentation materials and any other resources that were shared today. And if you want to revisit today's tools or share them with colleagues, Articulation's website is a great resource, articulationinc.com. Thank you again for joining us and for the work you do every day to lead, listen, and serve your community with courage and care. Take care. We hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.